Hey everyone, I'm Malachi Clark, your Spanish coach, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to have your first conversation. Because this is something that I feel like no textbook or app ever really prepares you for, and I've met so many people that get really far into learning Spanish and they still struggle with their very first conversation. It usually looks something like this.
Hola, ¿hablas español?
Sí, un poquito.
Ah, en serio, qué bien, un americano que habla español. Sabes que tiene tanto tiempo que no he hablado con un americano que habla español. Oye, y cuéntame, ¿cómo aprendiste?
Ah, sí, se habla. Tengo dos hermanos. ¿Y dónde está el baño? Oof, man, that was painful to watch. Does that look familiar? I know that's how my first conversation went. See, everyone, and I mean everyone, says un poquito when they're asked if they speak Spanish. In fact, it's become such a default response that the native speaker, when they hear this, they almost certainly think, yeah, this person speaks like 5 words. Let me help them out by switching to English. And just like that, as quickly as the conversation started, it's over. So, how do you get out of this? I'm going to give you 3 responses that can help you set the conversation on the right foot. These do 2 things. The first is they manage the native speaker's expectations without underselling yourself or your level. And the second is incredibly important, which is they redirect the conversation into topics that you're actually comfortable talking about. All right, so here's the first response. Bueno, mi español no es el mejor, pero me defiendo. Podemos hablar de cosas básicas y si no te entiendo, te voy a pedir que me repitas. ¿De dónde eres? Now, here's why this one works. You're being honest about your level, but you're simultaneously showing confidence. You're setting boundaries. I'll ask you to repeat, which gives you permission to not be perfect. Then you redirect with a question, ¿De dónde eres? And this directs the conversation to a topic that you can actually handle. It doesn't have to be de donde eres. You can replace this with anything that hooks into one of your language islands. Response number 2. Ahí vamos. O sea, sigo mejorando cada día. Bueno, ¿cómo te gusta la comida de este restaurante? See, ahí vamos is a much more natural expression that native speakers actually use. And this one sounds a little bit more fluent because you're sprinkling in some filler words, which makes your Spanish sounds more natural and authentic. In this case, you redirect with a contextual question, assuming that you're at a restaurant, you can ask about the food, and this links into a language island that you are likely more familiar talking about. En realidad no es tan bueno, pero ¿crees que me podrías ayudar? Me ayudas con el español y yo te ayudo con el inglés. ¿Vale? This one is one of my favorites because you're turning the dynamic into a language exchange dynamic rather than a native speaker talks, learner struggles dynamic. The follow-up question is incredibly important because if you don't provide a direction for the conversation, the native speaker will typically default to 2 options. 1, awkward silence, they don't know what to say, and they switch back to English. Or 2, they have to pick the topic of conversation, and this increases the chances that you won't understand whatever comes next, and the conversation crashes. So you've started the conversation, and now you've redirected it to a topic that you're familiar with. But what happens if they start speaking too fast, or you only understand half of what they say? Here are 3 tools to help you keep the conversation in Spanish when things get difficult. Let's say the native speaker responds and you only understand about 40% of what they said. Don't panic, don't freeze. Instead, focus on what you did understand. Repeat that back to them and ask a follow-up question based on that. For example, they say something like, bueno, yo soy de Guadalajara y me mudé aquí hace como 5 años porque conseguí un trabajo de una empresa de tecnología. And all that you caught was Guadalajara and trabajo. So your response is, eres de Guadalajara ¿Y te gusta tu trabajo aquí? You didn't have to understand everything. You picked up 2 key points of information and you kept the conversation going. Sometimes when a native speaker can sense that you're struggling, they'll try to switch back to English to help you out. And this is nice and all, but if you want to keep the conversation in Spanish, you can use these 2 phrases. Disculpa, ¿puedes decirlo en español? Or if you want to be playful, oh, perdóname, no entiendo inglés. ¿Lo puedes decir en español? This works because it signals that you're committed to practicing Spanish. Native speakers are going to respect that, and they'll keep the conversation in Spanish. Plus, the second one is just fun, it's a little silly, and it helps break the tension. Now, sometimes you feel like you might understand, but you just need to hear it in simpler terms. You can say, discúlpame, ¿puedes repetir lo que dijiste de una manera más simple? This keeps the conversation going in Spanish without having to switch to English. You're much more likely to understand it the second time just based on repetition and the native speaker rephrasing it with more simple vocabulary and grammar structures.
But Malachi, what if I've tried all of these tools and I still don't understand what the native speaker is saying to me?
That's a great question. I'm not sure why you're on the floor, but if you need to change the subject, you can do that. You can just say, discúlpame, no te entendí nada. ¿Podemos hablar de un tema diferente? And then you can follow up with a question about something they said earlier, or you can ask a question that is going to lead into another one of your language islands. Now let's visit our gringo from earlier and see how he does in his first conversation after learning these conversation tools.
Hola, oye, ¿hablas español?
Bueno, ahí vamos. O sea, sigo mejorando cada día. ¿Y tú? ¿De dónde eres?
Ah, qué padre. Mira, yo soy de Monterrey. Vine aquí hace 3 años porque conseguí un trabajo en software y aparte mi novia vive aquí. ¿Y tú? ¿Sabes cómo aprendiste español?
Ah, ok. Eres de Monterrey y tienes una novia de aquí. ¿Y te gusta tu trabajo?
Ah, sí, sí me gusta mi trabajo. I like my job very much. How did you learn Spanish?
Perdóneme, no entiendo inglés. ¿Puedes seguir hablando en español?
Ah, ok. Bueno, mi trabajo es de desarrollador y la verdad me encanta porque puedo trabajar desde casa. Mi jefe es muy flexible y con el horario y todo eso.
Discúlpame, ¿puedes repetir eso, pero de una manera más simple? No entendí todo.
Claro, yo trabajo con computadoras. Mi jefe es muy flexible. Me gusta mi horario.
Entendí. Trabajas desde casa. Eso es genial.
Sí, exacto. De hecho, ahora estamos implementando una arquitectura que nos permite escalar horizontalmente con contenedores.
Discúlpame, no entendí nada de eso. ¿Podemos hablar de un tema diferente? Antes me dijiste que eres de Monterrey, ¿verdad? ¿Cómo es la ciudad?
Sí, soy de Monterrey. Es una ciudad en el norte de México. En el verano hace muchísimo calor.
Ah, interesante. A mí me gusta el calor. All right. You get the idea. So with just a few small tools, you can keep the conversation going and get much further than you ever would by just saying un poquito. So after this video, I don't want to hear any of you guys saying un poquito. You are now well armed, well equipped for your first conversation. But see, this is all smoke and mirrors if you don't put this into action in the real world with real native speakers. So I challenge you the next time that you're in a cafe, if you have an opportunity online or wherever it may be, if you see an opportunity to strike up conversation with a native speaker, throw yourself in the deep end. I guarantee you that if you use these tools, you're going to have an amazing first conversation and you're going to be excited to keep learning rather than dreading your next conversation with a native speaker. Hey guys, that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. And if you need to achieve fluency in Mexican Spanish, be sure to check out my website. There I have more courses, videos, and all types of information to help you get there. And I still have some spots open in my mentorship program if you're interested in working with me one-on-one for very intensive training. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Hasta la próxima.